Thank you, everyone, for joining Treeline Review for this panel on how to nature journal. My name is Liz Thomas, co-founder of Treeline Review. We're reader-supported, and we are a mission-driven website focused on helping people buy right the first time and being better stewards of the planet by really just enjoying our time outdoors. And we're very proudly gear reviews made by real people, and real people, including our readers, have questions about ways we can document, remember, cherish, and enjoy our time in nature, aside from the sort of more active sports that you will traditionally see gear review websites talk about. So nature journaling, writing, poetry, and art are really part of our core here at Treeline. We have a lot of artists and poets on the Treeline team. And this class is for anyone who wants to learn some new creative ways to take on journaling and spending time outdoors. We'll be focused on nature journaling for an outdoor backpacking trip, hiking trip, through hike. But these are techniques you can use on any trip in your backyard or in your daily life. In this webinar, you will learn what is nature journaling and venture journaling. We'll be having a mini workshop on drawing, sketching, and doodling, one on poetry, one on watercolor and adding color. We'll also discuss topics such as developing your own journaling style and habit, practical tips, especially managing your gear and your art materials in the weather and in direct light, and sort of general real examples of how journaling habits develop and how to make the most out of your time being artistic and creative in the outdoors. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists.
Hi, my name is Becca. I am a writer and managing editor for Treeline Review. And I am a poet. I have a MFA in poetry from Regis University. I am a co-editor-in-chief of a poetry press called Switchback Books that publishes first and second poetry books by women and non-binary poets. And yeah, I have a book of my own called Acid Rain Epithalamium. So I will be leading a little workshop today on poetry, how you can incorporate it in your nature journaling. We'll go through some tips and like ways of getting started that feel approachable. And then we'll talk about some writing exercises and yeah.
Hi guys, what's up? My name is Heidi, she, her. I'm based in North Carolina. I am a professional full-time artist and hiking and backpacking guide. I got my introduction to hiking when I thru hiked the Appalachian Trail at 25 as my quarter life crisis, and I have been an artist my whole life, so it just made sense to kind of bring a sketchbook along on that trail. And from there, ended up finding a great passion for using my creative practice as a way of documenting my experiences outdoors. And that is kind of what my business, which is Sketching Summits, is all revolved around. A lot of watercolor paintings is predominantly what I do, commemorating or honoring different outdoor spaces and experiences that I've had. I have done a number of different through hikes or just often go out for weekend backpacking trips and stuff like that, or just like little hikes locally with, whoever's around in town and stuff like that. So I am constantly keeping a sketchbook and really appreciate having the sketchbooks and the nature journals that I have specifically from my thru hikes, because they have been such epic experiences. And so to have that unique form of documentation from those experiences is just a really good way to anchor what I'm learning while I'm on trail in my head. So yeah, let's see.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah. My friends call me Socks. I'm a thru hiker as well, and I also work for Treeline Review. I've been doing art part-time professionally for the last 5 or 6 years. Worked with Cooler Cloth, Point Six, Hightail Designs, CNOC, and Trails Magazine. I think that's most of it. But I got started with my doodle journaling because on my 2018 through hike, I was trying to write paragraphs every night in my tent about my day, and it just wasn't really working. And I also found that I wasn't going back and revisiting my journals. So I came up with a more fun way to journal about my hikes. I'm excited to share that with everyone today.
Thank you, Sarah. And you'll see Sarah's art on some of our Treeline Review stories as well. All right. So my first question for everyone is sort of a nebulous question. What is nature journaling or adventure journaling to you? And why do you keep a journal while you're out hiking or camping or in the outdoors?
I think it's really important to journal about your adventures because a lot of times when we're in the moment, we're experiencing something and then we don't necessarily remember all the little details later. And when I go back and look at my journals, especially my doodle journals, there's things that I've doodled and drawn about that I didn't remember until I looked back at the page. So I think it's a fun way to draw something in the moment, write it in the moment, and then revisit it, and like that memory comes back more vivid when you don't do something like that. So I think it's a really fun way to remember your trips and adventures.
So I definitely have to piggyback off of what Sarah said. It's a wonderful memory tool. Drawing specifically is what I have. Drawing and painting is what I have experience with, but I think that can apply to all sorts of different forms of journaling. But it just makes you focus a little bit more on details. And then for me personally, having physical drawings and paintings from trail, there's also some emotional expression in there. So I can tell when I look back on it, remember, oh, like I was very upset that day, or I was very happy, or I can tell that I spent way more time on that painting. The weather must have been nice. So it just gives like a lot more indication to what is going on that day. A little bit more of a like kind of left field reason that I do it as well is oftentimes I keep sketchbooks on trail. So they're bound, they're all taped together and they're coming home with me. But oftentimes I will also take out loose sheets of paper and do little paintings and drawings. And then when I run into trail angels or somebody who does something really nice to me, I have kind of a token of appreciation as well.
That's so sweet. I love that.
So I keep a journal just generally, and so that kind of just bleeds into all aspects of my life. So sometimes that's on the trail, sometimes it's not. But for me, it helps. Like I think of poetry as like the art of noticing or like witnessing or something like that. And so I think it helps getting into a mindset of poetry and engaging with the world around you. So it helps me notice things around me on a deeper level and appreciate what's going on around me in the moment. And then, like the others have said, it's easy to forget also. So like this gives you something concrete to come back and look at later. And both what you're noticing, like sensory around you, but also how you're feeling, like Heidi said, how you're feeling on any particular day outside. So it's a great way to remember that. It's a great way to also like have something physical for yourself. Like I think of this as like a gift to myself that I get to look back on. And yeah.
Well, now we're going to hop into the workshop portion.
Hi guys, Heidi here again. So I'm going to show you just a little bit about what I carry with me when I am going backpacking. We know that lighter weight, less stuff is definitely goes a long way, and there's been a lot of really awesome things on the market. So this is my go-to paint set by Viviva, and it is in a cork pan, so it is super, super lightweight, and these are all natural pigments. So if you lose some of the pigment, like the paint water in the dirt or something like that, it's not as harmful to the environment. There are a ton of different things on the market. Like here's one that is just, this one's a little bit heavier, but it's all these different stacked packable paints. These ones have been really fun as well. They kind of come out like a fan and they have all the different colors and a little slot for your brush. Art Toolkit is a great company as well. I just had it over here. Here it is. These ones are super tiny, really, really little. For me, they're not quite enough paint because I paint very heavy-handedly. So these are great for like a weekend trip or maybe a week-long trip. But for the through hikes, I go for something that has a little bit more. And then as far as sketchbooks are concerned, they do make a lot of really great like watercolor sketchbooks. So this one is hardback. So this is a little bit heavier than what I would take on a longer backpacking trip, but is great for front country camping or little weekend trips or something like that. And it's nice to have the thicker watercolor paper because it's more durable, but I do often just go with the Moleskine. The paper will wilt and bend as it gets the water medium on it. It's not really made for that, but it does still totally work. Oftentimes when I'm on trail, I don't really think of myself as painting. I'm just coloring in the lines with paint, and I'm not getting as many layers or as nuanced with it. So the Moleskines or just like thinner paper with a soft cover tend to be just as efficient as anything else. And then as I did mention, sometimes I do carry loose paper. So I have done this technique where I have this pencil box and it is filled with 5x7 paper. And I can fit also my paint kit and everything else in there. And so then I can do loose leaf paper if I wanted to, say I had like a show, an exhibition coming up, and I wanted to make sure that I was making paintings that don't need to stay in the sketchbook. Then that's an option as well. The other things I carry, obviously, a paintbrush. Sometimes you just go with a regular one. These water brushes, they have a chamber that you can put water in and squeeze it through, which I don't actually use, but because they're hollow, they are lighter and they come with a lid. So those are great for on trail as well. This is from Sea to Summit. There's a lot of different companies that make these collapsible little espresso cups that make a great water bin for you while you're painting. And then I also just carry, I'm a big fan of a shop towel, which are those blue towels that you could get at like an auto repair place, but a paper towel or a sponge, anything like that works as well. And I'll just jump in and I'll try to be as quick as possible about this with a little tutorial, talk a few different painting techniques. And my goal is to just not be overly complicated about it, because when I'm on trail, I'm not overly complicated about how I'm painting. The point is to document and to record and to use it as an opportunity to feel more anchored in the moment. And like we talked about already, recording your memories and giving yourself a moment to kind of practice some mindfulness. And also, like, I think I personally get bored on trail. You know, we're used to this world where we're constantly stimulated by these screens on all sides of us. And so when we get out into nature, it can be a little tricky to just sit still. So it's also just nice to have something to do with your hands. But I'm going to shift my phone over here. And I'm going to try to walk you through. I feel like this is a painting I've done 500 times. It's when you get to camp, you're all set up, you have that downtime. And I often just paint from observation, what I'm looking at. Sometimes I paint from a picture on my phone. Sometimes I stop at the pretty view in the middle of the day, but oftentimes I don't get around to painting until I'm in camp. So I feel like I've painted this 1,000 times. Just the simple view, you're in a campsite, you see the tents around you, you see trees, and you see, you know, the nature off in the distance. So this one was particularly like right at the end of fall. So all the leaves have fallen off the trees. I come in first with a very light pencil sketch. I think drawing is very intimidating for a lot of people. But painting, like I said earlier, is kind of a little bit more just coloring inside the lines. And nature, particularly like mountains, there's not a whole lot of structure that needs to be drawn out. So for this, I just start with a simple horizon line. This is going to be about two-thirds of the way from the top of the page. And I do have my paper taped down for the sake of this demonstration because the water will cause it to curl a little bit. You don't need to do that. You kind of have to wrestle the paper a little bit. It might curl on you. I'm just doing that so that you guys can see what I'm doing when I'm painting on trail. I'm not trying to get this like flat surface. And if the painting does curl and you want to flatten it, just wait for it to dry and stick it in a heavy book and you'll be good to go. So I start with this horizon line. I'm going to come and kind of do almost just like a cloudy shape of where the underbrush that is still green. And I'm just doing some little squiggly lines. So that's going to be kind of this green brush here. And then we have the trees and then we have the mountains in the background. So I just sort of sketch out what those are. And when I'm choosing this location, when I'm actually painting on trail, I am basing it off of my comfort because I've already hiked all day and I'm tired and I'm exhausted. So sometimes I might find something compositionally that's more interesting, but if my butt goes numb while I'm sitting in that position, I know I'm not going to finish the painting. So what's the point? So I prioritize my comfort first. A sit pad also goes a really long way. And that making sure I have something comfortable to sit on. And then I just paint whatever's in front of me in that moment. And try not to worry too much about whether or not this is going to be some sort of masterpiece. For the sky here, I'm just going to do some really simple blending. Watercolor paint is pigment that is activated by water. It can be reactivated by water at any point. So even though this is an old painting, if I were to get it wet, that pigment would then move around on the page. So I come into these pans and I'm going to start with a blue color. And the more water I use, the more translucent and light it is going to be. And the sky is, you know, light and lit up. It's going to be the lightest value thing in the painting. So I'm going to be really heavy-handed with my water and not use a whole lot of pigment. And I'm just going to start with a brush of blue across the top. And then we're going to transition to orange. And because this pigment is reactivated by water and kind of flows around with the water, it will just kind of immediately blend with that blue that I've already painted in. And if it doesn't, just some friction over that line, kind of, you'll see that I'm repainting over the same area kind of redundantly. And that is what helps blend. I've decided that my orange is like more vibrant than my blue. So I'm going to bring a little bit more blue in and then come in with some yellow at the bottom. So we get this kind of like evening sunset through the trees. And same thing with that yellow where it meets the orange. I'm just giving it some friction and really kind of painting over it multiple times so that those two colors blend together in a more natural sort of way. Watercolor does dry very quickly. I'm on the East Coast, so I deal with humidity, and so I can tell sometimes it doesn't dry quite as quickly as other times of the year or other locations. But for the most part, it dries pretty quickly. If I'm trying to paint these mountains, if my sky is still very wet and I'm trying to paint the mountains right on top of it, it will accidentally blend. So you may need to wait for that to dry a little bit more before you add the next element, but I've painted pretty lightly. I've noticed when I work with other people and I'm teaching them, some people tend to just paint very heavy-handedly with the water. There's nothing wrong with that. You just might need to give yourself a little bit more dry time. As far as my mountains are concerned, this is where I was saying earlier, I just color them, right? So don't think of it as painting. I just want both of these bumps to be green. So I find a nice earthy green on my palette. And what's nice about watercolor as well is that it is so nuanced. It's not going to give you this flat green color like if you were in Photoshop and you used the fill button and you got solid green. It's going to go ahead and give you texture whether you want it to or not. And so you can use that to your advantage. You're going to see these nuances of where more pigment has gathered here and less has here. And just work with that. You know, it's going to make it look a little bit more natural. It's going to give you a little bit more dynamic to your painting by having that just variety in brush strokes. You'll see your brush strokes, so you can use that to your advantage. If you want to get a little bit more detailed, you can come in with a wet and clean brush. So I'm just cleaning it off, getting some water on it. And with no pigment on my brush, I'm actually able to come in and kind of go over one area multiple times. And that's going to pull the pigment off of the page. And you can only do this so much before the paper is just like, no, we're done with that. We're going to start disintegrating. But you can sort of erase and lighten just a little bit in that way. And then I'll move on to, I'm going to give that a second to dry. I'm going to move on to the foreground up here in the front. This is a slightly different technique where I'm going to be kind of creating a texture to imply the fallen leaves on the ground. You cannot, with watercolor, paint lighter colors on top of darker colors. So you always want to start with your lightest colors and then build up from there. So I'm coming in with this raw sienna color, which is like a yellowish brown. And I just realized I forgot to draw my tents. Those are just triangles. For the sake of time, I might just draw one today. So then you start just with the same thing that I did on the mountains, where I'm just filling it in with one color. And if you can catch it while it's still wet, you can get some really, really fun textures. And I'm probably only going to do about half of the page at a time just to move things along and to take advantage of the wet on wet technique that I'm practicing here. So from there, the next darkest color, and I'm going for fall colors here on the ground, I'm going to pick up some orange. And since it's still wet, that orange pigment is just going to bleed within the yellow that's already on the surface. And I just get really messy with it. So I get a little bit of that pigment on there, and then I kind of ruin my brush a little bit, just like lots of bouncing. And that's when you start to get some different textures. And I think this is great for achieving those leaves on the ground, that sort of look. So then you can come in with the next darkest color, which would be I have a sort of terracotta red color on top of that. And then if you wanted to really push your values and make sure you have some darker darks, coming in with a burnt umber, which is like a dark brown, and even doing a little bit of that. And every once in a while, I'll put my paintbrush on the paper and there'll be way more pigment than I wanted to do. And it's easy to kind of gasp and freak out about that, but it moves around and it's always reactivatable. So you can just come in and push it around and just pretend that dot that you put on there that's too heavy, just start pretending that's your paint pan. And instead of pulling your paint from here, just pull it from wherever you put it that you feel like you got, too much. Next, I'll come in with the undergrowth that is this sort of stripe down the middle. Here I'm going more heavy-handedly with my paint. So it's actually the same color as these mountains in the background, but how I was saying earlier that it was very water heavy with just a little bit of pigment. This is a lot of pigment with less water. And that's how you get things to be darker with watercolor, that you just tone down the opacity, tone up the opacity of it by using more pigment. And same thing with this, that by doing that kind of dotting motion where you're just kind of like going like this with your finger, with your hand, you're going to be creating a very leaf-like texture. And then if you want to get a little bit more dynamic, you want to have a little bit more to it, you find, maybe you think that it's just kind of boring that you're using the same color twice. You can put some shadows in there. I actually don't have any black paint in this palette, and I tend to avoid black paint because it can be very overpowering, and shadows and shade is not often black. It's actually usually more of a blue or a purple color. So especially against a green backdrop, coming in with a little bit of blue to create these darker little nooks and crannies within the texture of this underbrush. Then if you have any elements that are in your painting that you want to paint in, so for example, this tent, oftentimes I might also draw maybe the fire ring and a fire, or maybe some other hikers that I'm with if they're standing around, even if it's just as little stick figures, that's great. Just know that layering with watercolor is very challenging. I wouldn't be able to come in unless it was a black silhouette and paint on top of what I've just done. So when you are doing that, you're just going to leave. So where I have this tent, if I were to have painted all the way across, I would leave that white so that I can then paint into it. If you're familiar with acrylics or you've done like a paint and sip class, that's not the case. You can always just paint over. So just being able to come in with that, whatever color you would like to choose for your tent. And tents are easy to draw, you guys. They're just two little triangles and you get the point across. You can do that. And then, like I said, layering lighter colors on top of dark doesn't work. Layering darker colors on top of light does. And so that's how I would come in and then do these trees. And I'm just going to do one or two for you so you get the idea of it. And then if you have been following along, you can just continue. They're just straight lines. And sometimes they start halfway down the bush. Sometimes they start kind of behind it. Just to give a few more layers and imply some depth. And I'm just coming in with brown, sometimes a brownish blue mix. I'm still on a quest to figure out what color tree bark actually is because I'm just not sure. And I've painted 10,000 trees in my life, but a nice sort of darkish gray. And when in doubt, I love mixing a dark blue and a dark brown to achieve that. And so you can just come in and get some lines, and if your hand kind of shakes, again, that's all the better because you're getting this more organic shape of the tree rather than something that's super straight that you don't actually see as often in nature. So I'll probably end it there. Hopefully that was informative for you guys, and you can see how using those simple techniques that I just talked about can get you from here to here. And then one thing that I like to do at the end, a little bit of outlining does go a long way on trying to separating some elements. So carrying a like a Micron pen or a Sharpie pen or even white gel pen if you want a different value, that can be something that you can then add in on top. But yeah, that's what I have for you today, and hopefully that was helpful and insightful.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Heidi. I know there were some questions about what your equipment is.
I'd be happy to recommend a number of different products. I do sell the Vibevo, which is what I was using in this demonstration, on my website. Like it's not my product, but I just buy it at wholesale and sell it because I love it so much. So my website is sketchingsummits.com. And if you go to the shop section, you'll find actually the full kit. So it comes with the paint and the sketchbook and the whole 10-ounce thing that I take backpacking. So that is there. And then if you want some other recommendations, I can absolutely provide them.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Sarah, do you want to go next?
So I wanted to share my doodle journaling. First, I wanted to talk a little bit about supplies. So here are some of my favorite notebooks I like to take when I go out and do a through hike and want to bring a little journal. I like these field notes. They come with a dot grid paper, which is really nice for doodling. They're about 3x5, pretty inexpensive. There's also Write in the Rain, which is a waterproof sketchbook. This one's kind of neat too, but it does have the waterproof paper is hard to write on, and you do usually have to use a special pen from Write in the Rain. So something to keep in mind. I also got this little adventure log off Amazon. It's got a little bit of a different outline. So that's kind of fun too if you're looking for something that's a little more guided. And then I have a little tiny moleskin with blank paper that also has like a little fun back pocket in it where you can store little like trinkets or receipts or fun things that you find along your journey. So those are all fun options. What's nice about them is they fit really nicely in my very fancy journal protector, which is a Ziploc freezer bag, which also will hold usually a Micron pen. You can usually fit a pencil in there too if you want to take a pencil and an eraser. You could even bring a marker along and another pen. And so it's nice to have everything in your little Ziploc bag, and then you can just fold it up. It's super waterproof. If this gets worn out, gets holes in it, you just buy another Ziploc bag and you are good to go. So real quick, that's just the fun, easy peasy journaling. Doesn't require much. These all of these are like super inexpensive, easy to grab off Amazon or any of your big box kind of stores. And then as far as pens go, I really like using these Micron pens because they are waterproof. I prefer to use pens when I'm journaling out in nature instead of a pencil. I feel like if you're bringing a pencil, your tendency is going to be to erase and to try and make things perfect. And it absolutely does not need to be perfect. You're tired, you're at the end of your day. It should be about documenting everything that you saw that day and getting it down on your paper so you can eat food and go to bed. So with that being said, I have this little class kind of written out here in my journal for you. So how to art journal. Rules. There are no rules, just guidelines. We want to have fun and make it your own. So that's like the number one thing. There's no rules. So if you're feeling like you can't do this, you can. And you can absolutely just have fun, make this your own. It does not need to be difficult. Everybody can do this. It should be super fun. And then we talked about our materials and supplies, a journal with some pens and a Ziploc. I really like these 3.5x5x5. It's a really nice size for almost every hike that I do. If I'm doing a long hike like a PCT through hike, I'll go through several of these little 3x5s and send them to myself in resupply boxes. And then you just need 1 or 2 pens. I usually keep it to 2. I'll have a bigger one and then a smaller, finer tipped pen. A Ziploc bag keeps the water out. And then you want to test your supplies and practice so that you find something that works for you. These pens are kind of neat. It's a Faber-Castell brush pen. It's kind of fun. Like if you like doing shadows and things like that, that's a nice option. In addition to having something like this Micron that draws just regular lines. So as you play with this, you'll find supplies that you really enjoy that work really nicely for you. So what does a doodle journal look like? I made this little sample page for you. And I find that these are like these individual little drawings that I made here aren't particularly like well done or um like super magical or anything on their own. But when you put them all together, I feel like this is a really fun page to look at. It's got a lot going on and it tells the story of a day that, there was a lot of elevation gain. It talks about the mileage, the total mileage. What day am I on my hike? What was the weather? And then a lot of my journals mention food. I think that's pretty common amongst those of us that are spending a lot of time outside. But it tells the story of your day. So, today this was a day where there was like wet shoes all day. Why? Because there were 3 river crossings. But maybe my beanie is my new favorite gear because I discovered that it was keeping my head nice and warm and dry. So super appreciative of it. Tons of water on the trail. That sounds really nice. No water carries. Maybe I made some new friends. It looks like I made a friend named Apple Pie and then 2 cups. Oh, it was a cold night, 15 degrees, and I had a perfect pitch. So I was super excited about that. Nice little sunset, hot chocolate treat. And again, like all of these individually are not super great doodles, but when you put them together, this is kind of like a fun page and you can get the idea of like what that day was about. And likewise, I have another one for you here that showcases a different day where day 32, where maybe we had clean socks, which is always super exciting, ate some Idahoans, had 3 cups of coffee, had noisy neighbors, snore, some daisies, lots of water, an owl, and a very angry snake. So again, like none of these are super like well done on their own, but when you put it together, it's like a fun page to look at. And that's kind of what we're going for with this doodle journaling. So the next thing I want to talk about is what should you be doodling about? Because I do feel like personally, it's kind of hard to figure out where to start. So something I like to think about is if you go through the 5 senses, think about something that you saw that day. Anything that's important to you that you saw during the day that might be different than something you saw the day before or the day before that, something that stood out to you. Like here's some Joshua trees or maybe butterflies or some neat little mountains. So I always want to start with something that I saw. And then I'm going to go on to what did I hear today? Did I hear my neighbors were snoring? Maybe there were some new birds that I'm listening to. Was my stove hissing? Lots of wind. And that gives you another framework of something else that you can be drawing. The next thing is, what did I smell? Campfire, maybe some nice coffee, flowers, dirty socks. Maybe somebody close to me was farting, very common on the trail. So you can draw something that you smelled. And then I'm going to go on to what did I feel? Was it hot, cold? Did I have rocks in my shoes? You can even talk about like, were you tired? Were you wet, cold? All of those things. So I go through what I felt. And then finally, what am I tasting? Which is my favorite part, as you might have discovered from my previous pages. I love drawing my food. It's like one of my favorite things about my journals is to draw my food because I'm usually doing this close to dinner time. But yeah, it's fun. I think it's fun to kind of draw your food and what you're tasting. And then I always appreciate clean water. I don't know about you, but on trail, whenever I get a nice clean liter of water, it's very exciting. That Sierra water always tastes so good, especially if you've been consuming a lot of desert cow type water. It's so appreciated. So I'll go through these once, and then if my page isn't full, I'll start to do it again and then go through what do I see? What do I hear? What am I smelling? What am I feeling? And what am I tasting? And you can do that over and over again until you run out of things or have a full page. Or you can move forward and go into other aspects of who, what, when, where, how, and why. Who did you see or who did you hike with? Did you see any cool animals, like maybe a great horned owl, a super neat squirrel, a scary spider, maybe a friendly spider? Did you make any friends? What did you do? I always like to add my data somewhere on my page. So I usually do that at the top. You might have a different way of organizing that for yourself, but I always like to do my mileage, my elevation. I love tracking that because it's fun to look back at, especially um, when you realize that some of those days you might have done a lot more than you realized. I always track my total steps and what trail I'm on because you could have multiple trails in your journal. I always add the when, like today's date, what season it is. You can draw things to indicate that as well. And then where is fun as well, more of like a landscape, kind of like what Heidi went over. But are you in the desert? Are you in high alpine terrain, lakes, trees, forest? And there's a lot you can do with that with drawing little fun scenes. And the how, were you running, hiking, flying, swimming, driving, skiing? And so your mode of transportation or what you were doing for that day is also something that you can doodle and draw. And the why, like why are you out there? Everyone has a different why, so I can't answer that for you. But are you out here to make friends or have an adventure or blow off some steam? So it might be fun to know why you're doing something, especially if you're on a shorter trip and you might not remember later. So those are the two main things. And then as I start to fill these out, I kind of will do like my what, the date, the miles, the data, and then you kind of allow a different space for each category. So you can put your where here, feel, and as you fill in these spaces with doodles, you're going to find that you might have some blank spaces that need filling in, and you can either continue to fill those in with more doodles or with space fillers like stars or sparkles. And we can talk more about that in a minute. And here's another example of just a fun page. And then I did some little space fillers here. And finally, I want to show like you can draw trees in a bunch of different ways. It starts with just a triangle and a line. And all of these could be a pine tree. You don't have to be a super professional artist to do this, and you can change your style over time. So tree could simply be a circle and a little rectangle, or it can be something more bushy, squiggly, or more fluffy. Your mountains can be just two lines. That's totally acceptable. Or you can do some more squiggly lines with straight lines coming down to indicate some shadows. And it doesn't have to be anything like super difficult or special. It can just be some lines. And I just wanted to point out when you're drawing that almost everything you want to draw is going to be either a circle, a square, a triangle, and then with that, or a rectangle. And it's you take these four basic shapes, you practice drawing them over and over and over again, and you use those shapes to put together to create your doodles. So if I wanted to draw an owl, you could draw a circle for the head, little triangles for its little owl ears, some circles with smaller circles inside to make the eyes, and a little triangle for the beak with another circle for its body and little rectangles to make its little wings. And then maybe we want to do some little like triangles for feet. And then you can make it more detailed and do a little like another half circle or something for its belly. Give it a little texture. But that's like a pretty quick little owl. And that on its own doesn't look super fancy, but you add a few little like sparkles to it, and you add some of your food that you had next to it, and pretty quickly you start to have an exciting page to look at that's going to have more detail and be more filled in. If you're really comfortable drawing these four shapes just really quickly, you can move on and then start drawing spheres, which are going to be more shaded. You can practice drawing cubes, and then pyramids. The more you practice, the more you doodle, the more you can fill in your pages and the more dynamic they're going to be, but you get to make it your own. Hopefully that was helpful, and I'll pass it to Becca.
That was really awesome. But I'll start with supplies, which is very, very simple. I personally just use whatever notebook I have. So like, for example, I have just one of these right now. Decorate it with stickers. Um, like Socks already said, Write in the Rain has waterproof notebooks. So if you are frequently somewhere rainy, that works. I will say I tested it today, and like Socks said, you might need a special pen because the regular pen bleeds a little if it gets wet. So, but that's an option. And the field notes, like Socks also said, are great for like an ultralight, as an ultralight option. Or you can be like me, and I often don't have a journal physically on me unless I am backpacking. But if I'm just day hiking, a lot of times I do these kind of exercises that I'll go over in a little bit in my head. And then if I get to a point where I know I want to write something down and I don't have a notebook with me, I will either type it in my notes app and then write it, like kind of write it, journal it later, or even just like record myself speaking, and then transcribe in a journal later and spend more purposeful time with my journal later. So that's also an option. Tips for getting started. I'm all about lowering the pressure. I think poetry, if it's not something you're already in the habit of doing, it can feel intimidating to a lot of people. So I'm all about lowering the pressure and lowering like your own personal standards for what you think poetry has to be. Frankly, this is something that no one else ever has to see. This is for you. So this can be whatever you want it to be. There are no rules. Um, and I see poetry as like the role of poetry in nature journaling as a mindfulness practice and a way of just noticing the world around you. So lowering the bar of just like what poetry has to be is, I think, the biggest tip for getting started there, and just thinking of this as like a mindfulness practice. Um, yeah. And I think also like jotting things down in your journal and then knowing you can expand later if you want to is another way of lowering the pressure too. So you can just write a little, start with a little and come back to it later. So I will go through a few exercises that I like to do to help inspire some poetry while I'm also outside. The first one really is very similar to what Socks did with the doodling with the five senses. This is you've probably heard of this if you do any like mindfulness. It's a mindfulness technique. The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 of the senses. So the idea behind it is like, what are 5 things you see, 4 things you can feel or touch, 3 that you hear, 2 that you smell, and 1 that you taste. And I think also, as for an accessibility note, if there are certain senses that you want to swap out or whatever, you can, of course, do that. Again, there are no rules. But a tip I have for this is like, if you are starting with 5 things you see, I think it's really great to get as specific as possible. So you could say that you see a tree, or you could say that you see like one brown maple leaf in the midst of like a bunch of green ones, or, like getting more specific. Paradoxically, the more specific you are in your writing, the more relatable it is to people. So, and it just kind of brings the scene to life more if you can get more and more specific. So that's an exercise I like to do. Sometimes I just do it in my head. I don't even write any of this down, and it's just like while I'm hiking, I do this as a mindfulness technique. But this also has inspired poetry. The title poem of my book came from this exercise. So that's one of my favorites. And then I think after that, like something that pairs really well with that. So if you've done that, you've written what you are noticing with the senses. You can then pair it with what you are feeling in that moment or thoughts that you're having. So like where do you notice your mind wandering while you're looking at this bird or listening to this bird? What else are you thinking about? Without feeling like you have to connect any dots. And in fact, it's way better if you don't. Just like maybe your mind is wandering toward, what you're having for dinner after this, or maybe it's like something that's been weighing on you. But like reflecting on that in your journal too, I think is great. And I think a lot of great poetry can come from the juxtaposition of like what you're experiencing in the world around you, in the natural world, and then what you are experiencing in your inner world. Yeah, so that's another writing exercise you can do. If you are more interested in like narrative journaling, basically kind of like storytelling, another writing exercise that I really like, so if you're like maybe in the middle of a hike or you're on a backpacking trip, is to sit somewhere comfortably and set a timer and do a stream of consciousness style journaling. And so this doesn't have to be poetry, this can be prose. But the only rule is that you can't stop. So you just keep writing and you like pen to page or pencil to page or whatever, and you do not stop until the time is up. And that might mean you have to like maybe you are rewriting a phrase over and over until you think of something new to say. But this helps, I think, lower the pressure you put on yourself to like have something perfect written down. And it also just kind of helps like thoughts flow. You could write about like what the trail was like on your way there. And then you have a narrative that kind of mimics the trail, which is cool. So that's another writing exercise I really like. Another kind of tip, I guess, is really just like if you find yourself having a hard time writing a poem, is just writing short ones. Like they don't have to be long. There's no pressure to write. I mean, again, there are no rules. So you can write a haiku. That's, a 3-line poem. You can make up your own form. That's 5 lines or whatever. Just about what you are seeing, what you are noticing, and just as it's a way of like engaging with the world around you, the natural world. Yeah, and then I think something that would be fun is combining like having a multimedia experience. So if you want to paint or doodle and then having poems next to that, I think is really, really cool. So say you're painting a scene and then like next to it, you just write a little poem and maybe they don't seem to be related. And I think that's actually kind of cool when they're not. Maybe you doodle a bird and then you have like a little poem about somebody's lost shoe that you noticed on the trail. And that's like kind of weird. They don't necessarily go together, but maybe they do. I don't know. So yeah, those are a few writing exercises. I kind of just went through that really, really fast. But if anybody wants any other resources or anything, I'm happy to provide plenty. I lead workshops a lot and I have a Substack where I have like poetry exercises every month. So if that interests you, I can send out that information too.
So much, Becca. I really loved your comment about paradoxically how being very specific can be more relatable, which is something I hadn't really thought about in poetry, but is absolutely right once I've started to think about it. We have a few more questions, and this is sort of the rapid fire section where I am looking for answers from all of you on your different ways of developing your journal styles. All right, so first question is about how do you develop your own journaling style, find your personal themes, balance accuracy versus creativity. So yeah, I would love to hear, Heidi, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think we live in a world where we see what other people are doing very often, especially if you're on social media. So I think that can be both a hindrance and a help, where you're seeing and comparing yourself to other people. And you can use that as inspiration to a certain extent. But the best way to kind of form your own style is to just do it. So like I've had people ask me like, how did you come up with that style? Or how did you decide to paint that? I'm like, that's just how it came out because that's how my hands worked. I think it's very similar to like your voice is just the way your voice is. Your face is just the way your face is. Your drawing style is just the way that your drawing style is. And so just finding the things that work for you, that are conducive for you, and finding inspiration from other people. Like if you like the way that somebody else's work looks, what do you like about that? Maybe make note of that. Trial and error it a little bit, but with the intent of making it your own and just finding your own voice.
That's really great advice. Sarah, do you have thoughts about developing your own voice? Because your own voice and the way that you do art is very different than Heidi.
It is. As far as journaling goes, I just kind of what she said, just keep practicing. I keep a daily journal as well. And it's kind of nice. You have a journal, you can close it. You don't have to look at it all the time. It doesn't have to be perfect. So just doing something every day, set a timer, 5 or 10 minutes, and just get something on the paper And eventually you'll start to see what's important to you and what you're doing over and over again. And I'm definitely going to change my style because I'm going to start writing little poems about my five senses every day, thanks to Becca. So that was really cool.
Becca, creating poetry, that's a whole different question of how you create your own voice. What are sort of tips you have for people about making their own space on the page?
Yeah, I think two things come to mind. I think the first is like if as long as you are being like honest with yourself or like not trying to sound a certain way and just like being writing what you notice, writing what you feel, I think you'll find your voice over time. Um, I think it's something that's like kind of hard to if you fake it, it doesn't feel authentic, right? So just like whatever feels natural to you is what I recommend. And then I also think like reading poetry more. The more you read poetry, the more you're gonna like feel it in yourself or like notice it in yourself or think that way. Like think in a more poetry focused way. So read it, finding poets you like and reading their work.
All right. The next question has to do with practical tips for hikers for journaling on the trail. And, sort of the flip side of the question is what are common mistakes and how do you avoid them?
I think that comfort is really should be a top priority. There's a lot of things about hiking and backpacking that can be uncomfortable. So like for me, having a sit pad, having a foam pad to sit on, or even on shorter trips where I'm not as worried about weight, to carry a chair as well. And like I was saying earlier, I prioritize my comfort before I prioritize what I'm actually observing. Like what can I comfortably observe? And then that just is going to happen to be what I paint. For me personally, I found like I'm tempted to give the advice of like, don't give yourself a rule, right? Like, don't say I'm going on a 7-day trip and I have to do a drawing every day for 7 days. But honestly, for some people, that sort of motivation, sort of checklist mindset does really work. So when I started my through hike of the AT, for example, I definitely wanted to paint as frequently as possible. But I also knew that was way too big of an undertaking to say I'm going to paint every single day for 6 months. So just, I'm going to paint as often as I can. And what does that mean to you? And if you're the kind of person that does better with specific parameters, give yourself those parameters. Or if you're the kind of person that doesn't want pressure because this is your vacation, pack the paints, and if you don't use them, you don't use them. That is totally fine. I will say that my trail name that I got on the AT was based on art, and I accepted it because I kind of wanted a little bit more pressure to make sure that I did continue that practice. So by accepting a art-related trail name, it kind of forced me to keep the sketchbook for the duration of my through hike. So a little bit of pressure was helpful for me, but I'm sure that's different for everyone.
My biggest tip is that when I started the PCT the first time, I started with this giant journal and I thought I had to fill out an entire page for every day of my hike. And I started out doing pretty well, writing a full page at the end of each day. And then I started to get tired, and the days started to get shorter and shorter with what I was willing to write. And that just wasn't working. And I got really frustrated. And so I think the smaller journals work better. They're ultra light. And having fewer art supplies, just taking 1 or 2 pens and doing a combination of things with no rules, doodling, poetry, a little writing, whatever it is, find something that works for you that you can do in about 5 minutes every night.
I would say, I second both of what Heidi and Sock said. And but just kind of like figuring out what works for you. Because like I used to bring also like a big journal with me, and I found I was never using it. And I had a much easier time like just doing the things in my head, putting them in my phone, and then coming back to them later when I had more time, and journaling after the fact sometimes. So yeah, just finding what works for you and kind of relieving yourself of some of the pressure to do it perfectly or do it right.
Do any of you have tips on protecting materials, art supplies from getting wet and managing weather and light in general?
The plastic.
I
think we all
Ziploc
probably,
bag.
yeah. Plastic.
Yeah. I have a hiking umbrella, and there have been about 2 occasions where I was glad that I had it for the sake of painting, to have that umbrella so I could work while it's drizzling lightly. But a gallon Ziploc bag goes a really long way.
Yep.
That's great and cheap piece of equipment there. All right, the next section is rapid fire Q&A. So Sarah, do I need to know how to draw to do some nature journaling or adventure journaling?
No, you absolutely not. Anybody can do it. If you can draw a circle and a square and a triangle, you're off to a great start.
Becca, how often should I journal when I'm outdoors?
As often as you want. Whatever feels good to you, that's how often you should journal.
Sarah, what if I'm not artistic? Does that mean I can't journal?
No, you absolutely can still journal. You can even just look at an emoji on your phone and copy the shapes that you see there to draw your owl or your tree or whatever else it is you're trying to draw.
Now, here's a question for Heidi. Can I journal digitally?
Absolutely. It's a tool that you're already carrying, so make it multi-purpose. The Notes app is a great app for that. There are drawing apps for your phone as well. And then also, and I think that Becca touched on this a little bit, talking into your phone or using, I mean, photography is an art in itself as well. So using the camera that's on your phone to document in a more intentional and artistic way is a great way to do that. And then also just sort of vlog style, when you're angry, when you're happy, when you're tired, and you don't have anybody to vent to, you have your camera, and that can go a long way on, especially on a bad day, to get it all out.
That's fantastic advice. All right, we're on our last question. And this is a time for you to sort of have your parting thoughts about making nature journaling part of your outdoor life. And if there's anything else that you meant to say earlier that you might have forgotten, we would love to hear that as well.
I think just making sure that you're keeping it fun or you're finding some sort of motivation to return to it. For me, I really enjoy sharing. So I talked about like doing it on the loose leaf paper and giving it out as gifts. And so that can be a motivation, or like if you have somebody that is supporting your hike or somebody back home who couldn't come, using that as some sort of inspiration, and finding some sort of way to share it if you're not shy about it. And then if you are shy about it, then we'll let somebody else's answer be more relevant to you.
I want to say that don't be afraid to write about the negative in addition to the positive. It's not always sunshine and rainbows. And I think in order to be authentic to yourself, you need to write about your gross blisters that are popping or how your feet hurt, because those are the things that you forget about when you're back home. And it is kind of fun to look back at your journal and go, oh, I only did this many miles because I had 5 blisters between my toes and I felt like I was never going to finish, but I did. And it was so great. So I think journaling those low moments in addition to the high moments, I think we forget to do that.
The only thing I would add now is just like decide why you're doing this, like what you want out of this experience, and just remember that this is for you. Nobody's making you do this. So if you're doing it, it's because you want to, and decide on your own what that looks like for you. And it can change, and nobody's going to be mad at you. You get to do whatever you want.
That's great advice. Well, thank you, Sarah, Becca, and Heidi, for leading this workshop and really giving us a lot of inspiration on adventure journaling, nature journaling, and really taking our creativity and art out into the outdoors. I really learned a lot, and I hope that our attendees, thank you so much for being here, also got quite a bit out of it. Well, thank you again for attending the Treeline Review webinar, and hope to see you all out on the trail.